You know that moment when someone blames you for their own mess and then realizes too late that you were the only thing keeping their world from falling apart? Well, let me tell you about the week my former boss learned that lesson the hard way. My name is Barbara, and I'm 31 years old. For the past 4 years, I've been working as an executive assistant to CEO James Mitchell at Meridian Consulting Group. Now, when I tell people I'm an executive assistant, they usually think I just answer phones and make coffee. But let me paint you the real picture of what my job actually looks like. I wake up every morning at 6 a.m., not because I have to be at the office early, but because James's life starts the moment he opens his eyes, and somebody needs to make sure it runs smoothly. By 6:15, I'm checking his calendar on 3 different systems. His work calendar, his personal Google Calendar, and the shared family calendar his wife uses. Why 3 systems? Because James refuses to consolidate anything, and somehow I'm the only person who can keep track of where he's supposed to be and when. While I'm having my coffee, I'm also checking his email across 4 different accounts. There's his main work email, his personal Gmail, his travel booking email, and the account he uses for professional memberships. James has never met a password he could remember, so I've become the keeper of his entire digital existence. I have a secure spreadsheet with login information for everything from his airline miles accounts to his gym membership. By 7 a.m., I'm reviewing his travel itineraries. James travels probably twice a month, and booking his trips is like solving a complex puzzle. He has preferences for specific seats on certain airlines, hotel room requests that would make a rock star jealous, and a rental car loyalty program that requires a PhD to navigate. But the real complexity isn't the booking. It's the coordination. See, when James needs to meet with the CEO of another company, I don't just send an email to their general inbox. I call Margaret, who's been the executive assistant to Richard Preston at Preston Industries for 15 years. We've worked together on so many meetings that we have our own shorthand. I know that Mr. Preston prefers morning meetings, drinks his coffee black, and always needs exactly 18 minutes between appointments to review his notes. Margaret knows that James is chronically 10 minutes late to everything, so she automatically builds that buffer into their schedules. This network of executive assistants is basically the invisible infrastructure that keeps the corporate world running. When James needs a last-minute meeting with someone important, I don't go through official channels. I text my contact at that company. When our office tech system crashes right before a big presentation, I call my friend Lisa at our IT vendor, and she prioritizes our ticket as a personal favor. But the real complexity of my job isn't the logistics. It's managing James himself. He's not a bad person, but he's definitely what you'd call high maintenance. He has strong opinions about everything from the temperature in conference rooms to the brand of pens he uses. He forgets important personal dates, loses track of his schedule, and somehow manages to double book himself at least twice a week despite having 3 calendar systems. I've become the keeper of his entire life. I know that his wife's birthday is March 15th. His daughter's soccer games are every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. And he has a standing dentist appointment every 6 months that he tries to reschedule at least 3 times. I know he's allergic to shellfish, prefers aisle seats on flights, and gets cranky if his lunch meeting runs past 1:30 because his blood sugar drops. The filing system in James's office is entirely my creation. When I started 4 years ago, his office looked like a paper explosion. Documents were everywhere, contracts were missing, and nobody could find anything. I spent my first 3 months creating an organizational system that actually worked. Every document is color-coded by priority and type, filed both physically and digitally, with cross-references that make sense to me but would be completely incomprehensible to anyone else. James makes about $200,000 a year running Meridian Consulting, while I make $72,000 managing his entire existence. It's not that I'm bitter about the pay difference. I knew what I was signing up for when I took the job. What sometimes gets to me is how invisible my work is. When James successfully closes a deal, he gets the credit for being well-prepared and detail-oriented. When a client meeting goes smoothly, people compliment his excellent organizational skills. Nobody ever thinks to ask who actually did the organizing. But I genuinely love the work. There's something incredibly satisfying about taking chaos and turning it into smooth, efficient systems. I'm really good at anticipating problems before they happen, and I take pride in making James look competent and professional, even when he doesn't deserve it. 3 weeks ago, everything changed. It started as a perfectly normal Wednesday morning. I arrived at the office at 8 a.m. and immediately noticed that James was already in, which was unusual. He typically didn't show up until 9:30 at the earliest. His office door was closed, and I could hear him on a phone call that sounded pretty heated. I started my usual morning routine, checking his calendar, reviewing his emails, and preparing his daily priority list. He had 3 meetings scheduled, including lunch with a potential new client and a 2 p.m. conference call with our West Coast partners. Nothing too complicated. Just a typical Wednesday. Around 9:15, James's office door flew open, and he stormed out looking absolutely furious. I'd seen him stressed before, but this was different. His face was red, his hair was disheveled, and he had that look people get when they're looking for someone to blame for their problems. "Barbara, I need to talk to you. Now." I followed him into his office, mentally running through everything I'd handled recently. Had I missed something important? Forgotten to pass along a message? I honestly couldn't think of anything that had gone wrong. "Sit down." He was pacing behind his desk like a caged animal. "I just got off the phone with Thompson Capital Fund. Do you know what Margaret Thompson told me?" Margaret Thompson was one of our biggest potential investors. I'd been coordinating meetings between her and James for the past 2 months, trying to set up a partnership that could bring $15 million in funding to our firm. Every interaction had gone smoothly as far as I knew. "No, what did she say?" "She said that her assistant told her we've been difficult to work with. Unresponsive to requests, poor communication, unprofessional scheduling practices." He stopped pacing and glared at me. "Barbara, you've been handling all the coordination with Thompson Capital. If they think we're unprofessional, that's a direct reflection of your work." I felt like I'd been slapped. "James, I don't understand. Every interaction I've had with Margaret Thompson's office has been positive. Her assistant Jennifer and I have worked together smoothly on every meeting, every conference call, every document exchange. What specifically did they say was unprofessional?" Don't try to deflect responsibility here. The bottom line is that a $15 million deal is in jeopardy because of poor coordination, and coordination is your job. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Can you give me more details about what went wrong? I'd like to understand exactly what happened so I can fix it." "What went wrong is that you're not doing your job properly. I don't need details. I need results. And clearly, you're not capable of delivering them." This was completely unfair, and I could feel my anger rising. "James, that's not accurate. I've handled every aspect of the Thompson coordination exactly as requested. If there's been a miscommunication somewhere, we should figure out what happened rather than just assuming." "Barbara, stop making excuses. I've made my decision." He sat down heavily in his chair and wouldn't meet my eyes. "This isn't working out. I need someone in this position who can handle high-level client coordination without creating problems. Today is your last day." I just sat there in complete shock. After 4 years of running his entire professional and personal life, after countless crises averted and disasters prevented, he was firing me over what sounded like a complete misunderstanding. "You're firing me? Over a phone call where you won't even tell me what specifically went wrong?" "I'm terminating your employment. Yes. This will be effective immediately. You can clear out your desk today." The rest of that conversation was a blur. James handed me a severance package, 2 weeks' pay, as if that somehow made up for 4 years of loyalty and dedication. I walked out of his office in a daze, packed my personal belongings into a cardboard box, and left Meridian Consulting for the last time. I spent the rest of Wednesday and all of Thursday in my apartment, alternating between anger and disbelief. How could someone be so completely oblivious to everything I did for him? How could he blame me for a problem he couldn't even specifically describe? But by Friday morning, my phone started ringing, and I began to understand exactly how much James had underestimated the complexity of his own life. The first call came at 8:30 a.m. "Barbara? It's James. Quick question. Do you remember the password for my United Airlines account? I need to check my miles balance for a trip next week." I stared at my phone in complete disbelief. He'd fired me 2 days ago, and now he was calling me for help? "James, I don't work for you anymore." Right, I know. But this is just a quick question. I'm sure you remember the password." The audacity was absolutely breathtaking. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you with that." I hung up and immediately turned off my phone. When I turned it back on an hour later, I had 6 missed calls from James and 3 text messages asking for various passwords and login information. I deleted all of them without responding. Friday afternoon, my friend Lisa from Quantum Tech Solutions called me. Barbara, I just had the strangest conversation with your boss. He called our support line demanding immediate help with some presentation software. When our receptionist explained that we only provide support to active service contract clients, he started yelling about how he was a CEO and we should be grateful for his business. Then he couldn't even remember the name of his own company when she asked for his account information. I nearly choked on my coffee. He forgot the company name? Completely blanked. She had to Google him to figure out where he worked. It was so bizarre that she called me just to share the story. By Monday morning, the calls and stories were coming in from all directions. Margaret from Preston Industries texted me about a weird voicemail James had left, trying to set up a meeting but getting all the details wrong. Jennifer from Thompson Capital called to ask if everything was okay at Meridian because James had missed a scheduled conference call and then called their office 3 times with different explanations for why. Tuesday brought the really interesting news. My former colleague Amy, who worked in Meridian's accounting department, sent me a message that made me smile for the first time since I'd been fired. Barbara, you need to know what's happening here. James showed up this morning looking like he hadn't slept in days. He spent an hour trying to get into his email, then called IT support 4 times because he couldn't remember any of his passwords. He missed his 9 a.m. meeting because he couldn't figure out how to access his calendar, and he's been wandering around the office asking random people if they know where he keeps his client files. It's honestly painful to watch. Wednesday was when James started calling me directly again, but this time the desperation in his voice was unmistakable. Barbara, I really need your help. I know we had some disagreements, but everything is falling apart here. I can't access any of my travel accounts, I've missed 2 important meetings because I can't keep track of my schedule, and I have no idea where any of my important documents are. Can you please just come in for a few hours and help me get organized? James, you fired me for allegedly being unprofessional and not doing my job properly. Why would you want someone you consider incompetent to help you get organized? Look, maybe I was hasty in my decision. We can talk about bringing you back if you're interested. I'm not interested in coming back, but I am curious about something. What exactly did Margaret Thompson say about my work that made you so angry? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Well, she mentioned something about communication issues. What specifically? Another pause. She said that her assistant had mentioned some scheduling confusion. What kind of scheduling confusion? I don't remember the exact details, Barbara. The point is that there were problems. James, did you actually ask for specific examples of what went wrong, or did you just assume I was at fault? The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. He'd fired me based on some vague complaint that he hadn't even bothered to investigate. Barbara, can we please just focus on moving forward? I really need help here. I'm sorry, but I'm not available to help. I hung up and called Jennifer at Thompson Capital Fund. Jennifer, it's Barbara from Meridian Consulting. I wanted to follow up on something. Did your office have any complaints about our coordination on the recent meetings with Margaret Thompson? Complaints? No, not at all. You've been wonderful to work with. Why do you ask? My former boss mentioned that there were some communication issues that concerned Ms. Thompson. Jennifer laughed. The only communication issue we've had is with your boss directly. Last week he called here asking about some meeting details, but he seemed confused about which project we were discussing. When I tried to clarify, he got frustrated and said something about his assistant not keeping him properly informed. I just assumed he was having a busy day. And there it was. James had somehow managed to confuse himself during a phone call with Thompson's office, and rather than admit his mistake, he decided it was my fault for not keeping him properly informed. He'd fired me over his own incompetence. Thursday brought even better news. My friend Lisa called with an update. Barbara, you're not going to believe this. Your old boss called our office again yesterday, demanding to speak to our CEO about our unprofessional customer service. Our CEO actually took the call, thinking it might be a legitimate complaint. Your boss spent 10 minutes ranting about how he couldn't get proper tech support, how his presentation software wasn't working, and how his entire business was suffering because of our inadequate service. Then our CEO asked him which service package he was paying for, and it turned out he'd never actually been a client. He'd been demanding free support for software he'd never purchased from us. Our CEO was so confused that he called me afterward to ask if this guy was having some kind of mental health crisis. By Friday, exactly 1 week after I'd been fired, the situation had reached peak absurdity. Amy from the accounting department sent me a message that had me laughing out loud. Barbara, James missed his flight to Chicago yesterday because he went to the wrong airport. Apparently he'd booked through United but somehow drove to the Delta terminal and couldn't understand why his name wasn't in their system. He spent 3 hours arguing with Delta agents before someone suggested he check with other airlines. By the time he figured it out, his actual flight had already left. The client meeting he was supposed to attend was with Thompson Capital Fund. Margaret Thompson was not happy about being stood up. That afternoon, my phone rang with a call from an unfamiliar number. Hello, is this Barbara Williams? This is Margaret Thompson from Thompson Capital Fund. My heart skipped a beat. This was James's potential $15 million investor calling me directly. Yes, this is Barbara. How can I help you? I hope you don't mind me calling you directly. I got your number from our mutual friend Jennifer. I understand you're no longer working at Meridian Consulting. That's correct. I left the company last week. Well, that explains a lot. We've been trying to maintain our business relationship with Mr. Mitchell, but frankly, the level of disorganization has become untenable. Missed meetings, confused phone calls, and yesterday he simply failed to show up for a critical presentation in Chicago. When I called his office to inquire about his absence, nobody seemed to know where he was or what had happened. I didn't know what to say. It seemed inappropriate to badmouth my former employer, even though he deserved it. I'm sorry to hear that things have been difficult. Barbara, I remember our interactions over the past few months. Every meeting was perfectly coordinated, every detail was handled professionally, and every communication was clear and timely. Jennifer speaks very highly of your professionalism and efficiency. Thank you, I appreciate that. I'm calling because I have a proposition for you. Thompson Capital Fund is expanding our operations, and we're looking for a senior executive assistant who can manage complex coordination between our offices in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. The position would involve supporting me directly, managing my travel and scheduling, and coordinating with our various partner firms. The salary range is $85,000 to $95,000, plus full benefits and equity participation. I nearly dropped the phone. A senior position with a $15,000 raise. Working for one of the most respected investors in the industry? That sounds like an incredible opportunity. Would you be interested in coming in next week for a formal interview? I realize this is somewhat unconventional, reaching out to you directly, but Jennifer assured me that you're exactly the kind of professional we need on our team. I would absolutely be interested. We scheduled the interview for the following Tuesday, and I spent the weekend researching Thompson Capital Fund and preparing for what could be the opportunity of a lifetime. Monday morning brought one final call from James, and this one was pure desperation. Barbara, please, I'm begging you. The Thompson deal is completely dead. Margaret Thompson called this morning to formally withdraw from negotiations. She said Meridian Consulting lacks the organizational infrastructure necessary for a partnership of this magnitude. $15 million. Barbara. Gone. The board is furious, and they're talking about removing me as CEO. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Name your price. I'll double your salary. I'll give you an executive title, anything you want. Just please come back and help me fix this. For a moment, I actually felt sorry for him. Not enough to help him, but enough to recognize that he was probably having the worst week of his professional life. James, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not available. What do you mean you're not available? Are you working somewhere else already? Actually, yes. I'm interviewing for a senior position at Thompson Capital Fund tomorrow. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Thompson Capital? But they just canceled our deal. Yes, they canceled their deal with Meridian Consulting. But apparently they were impressed with my professionalism during our previous interactions. Barbara, you can't work for them. That would be a conflict of interest, maybe even corporate espionage. I couldn't help but laugh. James, there's no conflict of interest. I'm not taking any confidential information with me, and frankly, Meridian doesn't have any trade secrets worth protecting. Thompson Capital is offering me a position because they value competence and professionalism. This is unethical. You're using relationships you built while working for me to advance your own career. No, James. I'm using my own professional reputation to advance my career. The relationships I built were based on my work, my competence, and my reliability. Those relationships belong to me, not to you. Barbara, please reconsider. We can work this out. There's nothing to work out. You fired me over a misunderstanding that you never bothered to investigate. You blamed me for your own confusion and incompetence. Even now, you can't admit that you made a mistake. Maybe I could have handled things differently. Maybe? James, you destroyed a $15 million business relationship because you were too proud to admit you'd gotten confused during a phone call. You fired the person who'd been keeping your professional life together for 4 years. And now you want me to come back and fix the mess you created. I know I made mistakes. No, you made one mistake after another. And the biggest mistake was thinking you could run your business without someone competent to keep you organized. Tuesday morning, I put on my best professional outfit and walked into Thompson Capital Fund's offices in downtown Manhattan. Their headquarters occupied 3 floors of a gorgeous historic building, with actual art on the walls and furniture that wasn't ordered from an office supply catalog. Margaret Thompson turned out to be exactly what I'd expected. Sophisticated, intelligent, and remarkably well-informed about everything happening in her company. Our interview lasted 90 minutes, and it felt more like a conversation between colleagues than a typical job interview. Barbara, I have to be honest with you. The way Meridian Consulting handled our business relationship was completely unacceptable. But your professionalism throughout the process was exceptional. You anticipated our needs, you communicated clearly and promptly, and you managed complex logistics without a single error. Thank you, Ms. Thompson. I really enjoyed coordinating that project, even though it didn't end the way any of us expected. That's exactly why I wanted to meet with you. I've been in business for 20 years, and I've learned that success isn't about flashy presentations or aggressive sales tactics. It's about competence, reliability, and genuine respect for your business partners. Those are qualities that can't be taught, and they're surprisingly rare in today's corporate environment. She offered me the position on the spot. Senior Executive Assistant to the CEO, starting salary $90,000, full benefits, equity participation, and opportunities for advancement that had never existed at Meridian Consulting. I accepted immediately. My first day at Thompson Capital Fund was everything I'd hoped working in corporate America could be. I had my own office with windows overlooking Central Park, a budget for professional development, and most importantly, a boss who valued competence over ego. Margaret Thompson introduced me to the senior leadership team as her new senior executive assistant, and everyone treated me with the respect that comes with an executive-level position. The work was challenging in the best possible way. Instead of just managing someone else's calendar and fixing their mistakes, I was coordinating complex investment strategies, managing relationships with high-profile clients, and supporting decision-making at the highest levels of the company. For the first time in my career, I felt like I was using all of my skills and education. 3 weeks into my new job, Jennifer buzzed my office intercom. Barbara, you have a call on line 2. It's someone from Meridian Consulting. I had a pretty good idea who it was. Thanks, Jennifer. I'll take it. Barbara, thank God you answered. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. James sounded absolutely terrible. Exhausted, stressed, and more than a little panicked. What can I do for you, James? Look, I know things ended badly between us, but I really need your help. The board voted me out as CEO last week. $15 million in lost investment, plus 2 other major clients who canceled their contracts after missing meetings and botched communications. They brought in an interim CEO while they searched for my replacement. I felt a moment of genuine sympathy. Losing your job is never easy, even when you deserve it. I'm sorry to hear that, James. Barbara, I realize now that I made a huge mistake firing you. Everything fell apart the moment you left. I couldn't access my own accounts, I couldn't keep track of my schedule, I couldn't maintain the relationships you'd built with other companies. I never understood how much you actually did until I had to try to do it myself. It was the first time I'd ever heard him acknowledge my contributions, And despite everything that had happened between us, I found myself grateful for the recognition. I appreciate you saying that. I've learned a lot about management in the past month. Mostly by watching my entire career implode because I didn't value the person who was actually keeping everything together. Sometimes that's the only way to learn. Barbara, I know this is probably pointless, but I have to ask. Is there any chance you'd consider coming back? I know I don't deserve it, but maybe we could start over. I could offer you a partnership stake in the company, or whatever compensation structure you want. The irony was incredible. Now that his company was basically worthless, he was offering me partial ownership. But even if Meridian Consulting had been thriving, I wouldn't have been interested. James, I appreciate the offer, but I'm very happy where I am. At Thompson Capital? Are they treating you well? Better than well. I have a senior executive position, excellent compensation, and most importantly, a boss who actually values my contributions. Right. Of course. There was a long pause. Barbara, can I ask you something? Did Margaret Thompson hire you specifically because of what happened with our deal? She hired me because she was impressed with my professionalism and competence. The fact that you torpedoed your own business relationship just made me available for her to hire. That's fair. I suppose I deserved that. James, let me give you some advice. The next job you get, try to remember that your assistants and support staff aren't just there to take orders. We're professionals with valuable skills and insights. Treat people with respect, acknowledge their contributions, and don't assume you can run everything by yourself. You're right. I know you're right. I just wish I'd figured that out before I destroyed my own career. After I hung up, I sat in my comfortable office chair and looked out at the Manhattan skyline. 6 months ago, I'd thought success meant being indispensable to someone more powerful than me. I'd confused being needed with being valued, and I'd allowed myself to become invisible in service of someone else's career. But getting fired turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to recognize my own worth and find people who actually appreciated what I brought to the table. Margaret Thompson values my intelligence, respects my judgment, and gives me credit for my contributions. When I successfully coordinate a complex multi-state investor meeting, she acknowledges my work in front of the entire team. When I solve a logistical problem that saves the company time and money, she makes sure my efforts are recognized in our quarterly reviews. Last week, I attended the Financial Services Excellence Conference as a representative of Thompson Capital Fund. I sat in on strategy sessions, networked with other industry professionals, and even contributed to a panel discussion about effective corporate coordination. For the first time in my career, I was visible as a professional in my own right, not just as someone's assistant. During the networking reception, I spotted a familiar face across the room. James was there, looking older and more tired than I remembered. He'd apparently found a new position as a senior consultant at a much smaller firm, a significant step down from being CEO of Meridian Consulting. When our eyes met, he gave me a small nod that might have been acknowledgement or apology or just simple recognition. I nodded back politely and continued my conversation with a potential new client. Later that evening, he approached me during a quiet moment. Barbara, it's good to see you. You look like you're doing well. Thank you, James. I am. I heard about your promotion to senior executive assistant. That's really impressive. I've been fortunate to find an organization that recognizes my capabilities. We stood there awkwardly for a moment, surrounded by the buzz of professional conversation and clinking glasses. Barbara, I owe you an apology. A real one this time. I never properly appreciated what you did for Meridian Consulting, and I definitely didn't handle your termination with the respect you deserved. I know it's too late to change anything, but I wanted you to know that I finally understand how much I took for granted. It was the most genuine thing I'd ever heard him say, and despite everything that had happened between us, I found myself feeling grateful for the acknowledgement. I appreciate that, James. Really. For what it's worth, I've learned a lot about leadership in the past few months. Mostly by watching everything fall apart and realizing how much work you were actually doing behind the scenes. Sometimes failure is the best teacher. I suppose you're right. Well, I should let you get back to your networking. Congratulations on everything you've accomplished. You deserve all of it. As I watched him walk away, I realized that my anger toward James had completely faded. Not because he'd apologized, though that was nice, but because his opinion of me no longer mattered. I'd built a new professional identity based on my own achievements, surrounded by people who actually saw and valued my contributions. That night, I went home to my new apartment, a beautiful one-bedroom place in a doorman building that I could actually afford on my senior executive assistant salary. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by my window, thinking about the strange journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I'd thought success meant being indispensable to someone more powerful than me. I'd confused being needed with being valued, and I'd allowed myself to become invisible in service of someone else's career. It took getting fired to realize that real success means being recognized for your own talents, not just your ability to make other people look competent. The funny thing is, James probably still doesn't fully understand what really happened. He thinks he made a personnel mistake and suffered some bad luck with client relationships. He doesn't realize that his fundamental approach to leadership was flawed, or that treating people as disposable support staff inevitably backfires in spectacular ways. But I understand now, and that's what matters. I learned that competence without recognition is just exploitation, that loyalty without respect is just enabling, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away from people who can't see your worth. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, walking away leads you exactly where you were meant to be all along. Today, I'm not just surviving in the corporate world. I'm thriving. I have a career I'm proud of, colleagues who respect me, and a boss who actually values my contributions. Most importantly, I've learned to value myself. Margaret Thompson treats me like the professional I am. She asks for my input on important decisions, includes me in strategic planning meetings, and makes sure my contributions are visible to everyone in the company. When I successfully manage a complex client relationship or solve a difficult logistical problem, she gives me credit in front of the entire team. Next month, Thompson Capital Fund is promoting me to Director of Executive Operations, with a salary increase to $105,000 and expanded responsibilities that include managing a small team of my own. I'll be overseeing coordination between our 3 offices and serving as the primary liaison for our most important client relationships. It's exactly the kind of advancement I dreamed about for years but never thought was possible as long as I stayed in traditional assistant roles. The difference is that Margaret Thompson sees leadership potential in me, while James only saw someone to handle his scheduling. Last week, a headhunter called me about a CEO position at a small consulting firm. The salary would be almost double what I'm making now, and I'd have full authority to build the company culture I believe in. I'm seriously considering it. A year ago, the idea of being a CEO myself would have seemed impossible. But I've learned that the skills I developed as an executive assistant, organization, communication, relationship management, problem solving, are exactly the skills that make great leaders. The only difference is whether people recognize your capabilities or just see you as support staff. James taught me an important lesson, though not the one he intended. He showed me that competence without recognition is worthless, but he also showed me what happens when recognition without competence gets exposed. His $15 million mistake wasn't just about losing a business deal. It was about the inevitable collapse that happens when someone confuses authority with ability. I don't think about James very often anymore, but when I do, I feel grateful. Not grateful for the way he treated me, but grateful that his incompetence finally forced me to recognize my own worth and find people who appreciate what I bring to the table. That's a lesson worth $15 million any day.